I started from the very beginning. So what I thought was going to be a quick and easy process, from a beginner, I realized quickly thereafter, I was like, this may take a while. So today I'm going to show you guys everything that I went through and hopefully save you guys some trouble. But I will give a little heads up. I am working from home, obviously, in this COVID environment. And today, of all days and times, my office is getting power washed on the outside. So I'll apologize if you hear any noise. It just had to be today at this time, but it's what happened. So I was just going to give everyone a heads up. So these are the topics that I'm going to cover today. So first, I'll discuss some of the pre-launching research that I did, which turned out to be very effective and very helpful. I'll discuss RSS feeds, which if you don't know, I will dive right into those because they are so crucial and I didn't even know what it was. Next, I'll discuss about different podcasting platforms and what you can use to kind of get your podcast out there. And then finally, the final step, I'll discuss transferring to Spotify and kind of where we are now with the media scopes in that project. So the first thing I did was research, and more research. I think I was on my computer for maybe hours and so many different websites, just trying to make sure that I could find everything possible on the topic and make sure I was getting nothing that I was not going to know. So these are some of the 9 tips that I found that I'm going to share with you guys today that I found very effective and very helpful throughout this whole process. So the first one is, after everything's been done and it's time to release your podcast, the first thing is you want to release at least 3 episodes on launch day. And I thought to myself, I had no idea why this was the case. I was like, why 3? And then as I started reading the article, it said this actually allows listeners to binge listen. So for example, if you are on Netflix or Hulu and you see a great new series or TV show that you're like, oh, I want to give this a listen, but they only have 1 episode available, you read it and you get hooked, or you watch it and you're like, what, where's more? We want to watch more. We want to keep going. So this is the same thing for podcasts, is you want to release at least 3, because this allows the listeners to kind of binge listen and see, oh, I really like this, or this may not be my thing. So this is actually really crucial. And what we did for our Spotify is we've already released 4 episodes. So this is really nice because people can kind of keep listening if they like, and then they'll say, oh, well, keep listening and keep waiting for some more episodes to be released. Secondly, is you want to submit to podcast aggregators and directories. So I'll talk about this a little later, but this has been said to increase your podcast listeners, because what it's basically doing is taking your podcast and just submitting it to more places for just a higher opportunity of more people to listen. And I'll discuss this in a later slide, because we use Anchor as one of our podcasting platforms, and it's proven to do really well, and it almost markets your podcast on its own. The third one is to publish at strategic times. Now, this is another thing where I had no idea this was going to be as crucial, but it said if you publish at strategic times, it can increase your listeners, because they will constantly come back at a certain day and time knowing you have a new episode or a new podcast coming out. And so to kind of establish this and find out what time and day works for you, it's kind of all about trial and error. So since we are still kind of in the beginning steps of being on Spotify, we have not yet figured out like, oh, what day and what time works best. So you kind of have to get it out there, kind of look at your metrics and analyze them and see, we have a ton of listeners on Friday mornings, as maybe they're driving to work, and not so many on Saturday for some reason. So you may want to kind of change up your schedule and say, oh, let's start putting the podcast on Spotify Friday mornings, because that seems to be the time when everyone's getting on, everyone's listening. And so this can just increase your listeners. Fourth is be a guest and invite a guest. So Ellen is already doing this with her media scopes, which is fantastic. I didn't have to do a thing for this. She was already doing it all on her own. It just gives you more of an opportunity for people to know what's going on about your podcast, to maybe give you some shout outs or say like, oh, I was just on this podcast. It was fantastic. It's just good old fashioned word of mouth advertising, back to the basics, but hey, it works. So you might as well keep doing it. For number 5, it's to create eye-catching artwork. So I didn't think about this at all because I was like, podcasts, we're just listening. But if you go on Spotify and you look up a podcast, the first thing you normally see is the title and you say, okay, what is this about? And the second thing that you see is actually the artwork. And after doing a lot of research and reading, it is shown that the artwork can actually make or break if people will listen, because they'll look at the artwork and say, oh, this looks like really interesting. Like it's appealing to my eye. It's kind of popping at me. It's not like dull and sad. Like, oh, I don't want to watch that. That just doesn't look appealing. So artwork is actually almost as important as the title and description, because it's one of the first things that people will see, and first impressions are almost everything. For number 6 is to treat the description as a sales pitch. So in the next slide that I'll show you after this, it's going to be an example of a description. But essentially, you want to hook the reader. That's the first thing that they're going to see is when they look at your podcast, they're going to look at the description and say, what is this about? And if you treat it as a sales pitch, like, oh, you want to hook them in, you want them to listen, you want to kind of grab them, but you don't want to give them all the info because you don't want to spoil everything. So the next slide I'll show you and kind of go in depth piece by piece of how that works. For 7th is Spotify code. So that is actually the picture seen below. That is a picture of a Spotify code. And this kind of works in with number 8, social media. So in this COVID environment, almost everyone is trying to use technology or use it to the best that they can, because that's almost the only way we can communicate now until things hopefully get better. But social media is being used so much for marketing and advertising because people are on social media all of the time. Me, as a college student, I know me and my friends constantly communicate through social media. So this is a really good way to get your podcast out there, because this is what people will constantly be checking, constantly be looking at. And with the Spotify codes, which is the picture, you can actually put that code straight on your social media. And on your Spotify, you can take a picture of it and it'll actually send you straight to your podcast. It goes straight to your front page. So you don't have to do any in-depth searching of the title or trying to scroll for so long trying to find what you want. This actually takes you right to it, lickety split, makes it so easy. Lastly, this one I'm a little iffy on. It is proven to do really well for certain people, but this is giveaway contests. And since we're in the very beginning of this process, we haven't done anything with this yet, but it works well for very popular podcasting people, because what they'll do is they'll say, hey, we just got this many listeners, we're going to give away a gift card of your choice. And so this kind of entices people like, oh, I'm going to listen. I want to get on that list of people who are listening so I can get the gift card. It works really well because people will then tell your friends, oh, go listen to this podcast. Like if you're on their listeners, you can possibly win a gift card. But since, like I said, we're in the beginning, this is kind of a difficult thing to do, which is why I'm a little iffy on it. But there is research proving that it works. So I just wanted to give that out there and let you guys know everything that I was able to find. So next, like I said in the last slide about giving an example, this is one of the examples of a description. So this is actually straight from Spotify, one of Ellen's Media Scopes with Michelle Lestas. And so I'm just going to kind of break it down and explain why it is the way it is and how it's kind of works to entice listeners. So what we did is with the title, you kind of want to do like a question or something from the podcast. So we did, what's your business identity? So when people see that at first, like, I wonder what that is. Let me continue to read the description. So in the description, we start off with a quote. Normally that's just a hook and entice the reader. So this one says, academics, game changers, dabblers, and blue skiers are really important players in our economy. And as someone, obviously I know what this is talking about because I've listened, but if for someone who's just trying to see, I wonder what this is about, you look at that and say, game changers, dabblers, blue sky, or what in the world is that? So people are kind of like, what is that? Like, you have me hooked. Like, I want to continue listening. I want to know what that is. And so then after that, we kind of give a little description about who Ellen's talking to, where she's from, and then kind of an overall, what are they going to be discussing in this podcast? So you kind of want to do the quote so you can grab the attention. You want to make the description quick and short, so you don't want to bore listeners who have to read a long paragraph because they'll be like, oh, I don't want to read all this. But you want to be able to give some background so people know what they're talking about and they say, oh, okay, this sounds interesting. Like, let me give it a listen. So now that we've discussed that, we are going to now go over one of the most crucial parts of the whole podcasting experience, and that is RSS feeds. And so, like I've said, and like Ellen said, I started from the very beginning. So I had absolutely no idea what this was, nor how important it was going to be through the whole process. So first of all, I was like, what in the world is an RSS feed? And so it actually stands for Rich Site Syndication, or really simple syndication. And I saw this, I was like, really simple syndication. As I kept reading on it, I was like, this is not really simple. Like, where in the world are people coming with this? Like, I had absolutely no idea. So I kept reading, I kept doing more research, and I found out that for podcasting purposes, it creates an actual link. So it's a physical link from the production of your podcast, so where your podcast is being made and what platform it's on, to other outlets for promoting or launching the podcast. So it's a physical link between where you make it and where it goes. And it essentially does everything for you. If you make changes on your platform, which I'll discuss in the next slide, and then you want to go to Spotify, that link makes the connection so you don't have to make changes on both sides. It automatically does it for you, which is super nice. And so after finding that out, I was like, oh, that's why it's really simple, because I don't have to do anything once I make the changes once. So it's really perfect. But it is crucial for getting your podcast out there, because without the RSS feed, I've learned you cannot do anything with your podcast. Basically, it can stay on one site and one site only. But if you want to market it like we do and kind of get it out there for so many more people to listen, you've got to get it to other platforms, other sites. And so that's what this RSS feed does. And so for the longest time, I have looked and looked. I said, do I make this RSS feed? I was like, can I find it somewhere? I just had absolutely no idea how I was going to find it, or if I had to make it on my own. But I then learned that you can actually use a podcasting platform like Anchor, and it will make your RSS feed for you. And it's a specific link, very specific to your own podcast. But that I was like, whew, I thought I was going to have to make something or find it online or type in a ton of information to kind of generate one. But these podcasting platforms will actually make it for you. And so these platforms are basically where you're going to house your podcast. It's where you're going to make all the changes. You're going to put in the titles, the descriptions, any artwork you have. This is just going to basically have everything you need for your podcast. And so there are a ton of different options out there. I've learned. I was doing research on the best ones. Are there any that are free? Are there storage limits? And so there's some called, if you're familiar with any of them, there's one that's Podbean. There's one that's called Anchor, and that's the one actually that we use. There's SoundCloud. There are so many out there, but you have to find the specific one that's going to work for you guys. So we chose Anchor to use ours because it was free, so we didn't have to spend any money for it. There were no storage limits, which means we could upload a lot of media scopes and not have all of a sudden an issue of saying, oh, you've actually maxed out on your capacity. Can you please pay $12 a month to increase the storage capacity? And we were like, no, thank you. So luckily Anchor was all free, no storage limits. Some of the other ones that are really good, like Podbean, we thought about using them, but after doing extensive reading, at first they said, oh, we're free, like come use us. And we're like, I sent an email to Ellen, actually. I was like, I think we found our winner. Like Podbean looks really good. And then I kind of went into their site a little more, and I saw a tiny little caveat at the bottom that said, oh, actually you can only upload 2 hours of your material or into the storage limit. So I think it was maybe 5 minutes later, I was emailing back to Ellen. I said, I take that back. We're not going to use that. They have a tiny little caveat in the bottom saying, oh, storage limits, you're going to have to pay $12 a month. And we were just not going to do that. So luckily we found Anchor, which had all of our solutions, and it was actually directly associated with Spotify. It's actually a product of Spotify. And so finding that out, I knew it would be super easy to go straight from this platform onto Spotify, which was our whole main goal, is that we want to make it onto Spotify. So this was the final step, making it to Spotify. And so this is where your RSS feeds come in handy, and Anchor has already made it easy. So what we did is we put all of our information in Anchor, the titles of our podcast, the descriptions, the artwork. And I went to the website. I said, oh, generate an RSS feed. And it made my RSS feed. And it actually said, oh, congratulations, you published like your first 4 episodes. And I was like, woohoo. Like, I thought I was getting ready. We were going to send it off to Spotify. And it said, would you like us to submit this to Spotify for you? And Spotify it's got a process of, if you submit your podcast, it has to get approved because they want to make sure you're not putting in any spam or anything. And so Anchor really just said, oh, well, we could do this whole process for you. And I was like, oh, sure, fine by me, because they were directly associated. So all I had to do was click a button, and they used that RSS feed, which was specific to our podcast. They sent it off to Spotify, and I think it was maybe 5 to 10 minutes later, I got an email that said, oh, congratulations, like you're on Spotify through Anchor, like, and use this link. And I could click that link and it went straight to Spotify. So Anchor really almost did all the work for me with just that one RSS feed, transferred everything from my Anchor over to a whole nother website, which is why RSS feeds, after much research, are crucial to this whole project. Another thing with being on Spotify is you have to make sure you are unique. So a lot of people use Spotify or even Apple Music. And so you kind of want to make sure you are unique. One, you want to stand out from the crowd. You want to be different. You want to be the reason that people choose your podcast, because it's not like the rest. But also, on the more business side, is that you don't want to get into any legal trouble. So you have to what we did was look on the internet and make sure no one else has the podcast name, because it has to be very unique. So you don't run into issues saying these people are trying to steal my name. Like, no, we promise it's not it. So you just kind of have to do a little more research for yourself to make sure that you're not taking anyone's ideas or any titles. But that's just a whole nother thing with being on Spotify. Another thing that Spotify lets you do is you can actually check your progress. So it will actually show you who's listening, where they're listening, when are they listening. And so after checking all that, that's when you adjust, like I said in the first slide about publishing at strategic times. This is where you can see when are people listening, what time, what day of the week, and then kind of adjust everything from there. And you go with that RSS feed, you can just go back to Anchor, make those changes and say, we're going to publish actually every Tuesday, or we're going to publish every Wednesday at 11 a.m. And that one RSS feed will say, okay, thank you, Anchor's got it. We don't have to do anything more. And that RSS feed will transfer over to Spotify and say, hey, they're going to publish at 10 a.m. Wednesdays, and it will do it for you, which is just all part of checking your progress and adjusting to work what's best for you. And then lastly is find what works. Obviously, everyone is going to be talking about different things in their podcasts. They're all going to be about different things. So you kind of have to find what works. Not everyone can post Saturday mornings. That's just maybe your audience is more of a Monday morning kind of thing. And so you just have to find what works for your own podcast and then adjust thereof. And so lastly, our final step is that we have made it to Spotify. We are officially launched and out there. This is actually what our page looks like. I've attached the link below, and I think it can also get sent out later with thank you, but this is where we are. We've made it through the whole process. When it was submitted, I was actually sitting in bed and I got an email saying, you're on Spotify. And I started cheering in my room. I was so happy because, kind of like anyone who's just starting from the beginning, I had no idea what I was doing. I really just backed it up on so much research and just trying to see what other people were doing. And I was like, I was a beginner. Like, I didn't even know what an RSS feed was or how crucial it was to the process. So when we were officially on Spotify, I was extremely happy. So now it's still under construction, like everything else from the beginning. We still have work to do. We have more episodes to publish, but we finally made it. So I hope that this kind of presentation that I showed you guys was helpful, and that if you you have any questions or sent anything in the chat, I'll be gladly to answer any of them. But thank you guys for your time, and I really hope you appreciated and enjoyed this presentation.